She could no more trust her brother than she could trust a frozen river in springtime. He would always be treacherous, with an undercurrent of unpredictability, and would always hate her. "We are of one accord." "We are," Uhtred replied. "I will allow this independence movement to propose my accession to the throne of Mercia, and be this country's lord. And you will." But Osrith had pulled Bué out of the ground and was stalking back to her camp. She would never declare to her brother that she would stand aside for him over Bibbenberg. It was too strategic for the Scots, even if we did abandon it. Uhtred broke oaths like he broke bread, she knew, but he would not break this one. Mercia would bring him riches. Whoever he chose to replace him would be an ally, so the borderland between Mercia and Northumbria would be at peace. And, she mused, he may even enjoy being Mercia's ruler. Like Osrith and Cumbraland, Uhtred might feel an unexplained attraction towards the land, as if he owed it loyalty. It was something. And, as Elfrith suggested, she could fly to Alba. If Uhtred decided to have her stand for Eardwulf, she would be long gone. It was a pity, Osrith told herself, for she had half imagined Aylesbury to be a suitable place to give birth, peaceful, orderly, no witchcraft accusation to stain her character. It was out of the question now, and her eye strayed to Finan, who was, again, engaged in the company of the Lady Edith. "What did he say?" Elfrith asked, as Osrith moved towards them. She could stand before her men now, for she had done the leader-like thing, liaised with the enemy's leader and found a solution. She looked at her men, who were waiting, silently, beside their deputy. "I alone am responsible, and whatever the outcome, no blame falls to you," she added, looking at every one of her men in turn. "If he decides he cannot hold his peace, I will stand before the Witan in trial." "And you think you stand alone, Captain?" It was Elfkin who spoke, his earnest, ready face eager for Osrith to hear him. "You will not face the Witan alone, We will be alongside you, as you are alongside us." And with that, a cheer went up from her men, from Egelfrith, who took her shoulder and clapped his hand on it in support, of Voshir, who looked over to the grave of Heard, and could not prevent water welling beside his eyes. "You are our leader," Elfrith summarized, "you are our captain, good and true, and we all stand with you, to whatever end. Though I am no mercen, I found myself in Mercia once again," Osrith told them, "and leading you when I had no cause to." She looked amongst them, smiled a weary smile. "If I am a good and true leader, then it is you, the best of Mercia, the richest and most honorable, that make me so." And she stopped, then, giving them orders for the night, for if she had not, Osrith knew that she would break down and sob. And that was no way for a leader to behave. "Elfrith," she managed to say, "give the night orders." And Osrith watched as her men, with renewed vigor, went about their duties. "What did he say?" Elfrith asked again, as her 3 warriors went about their business. "That he would ensure the men are not held to Eardwulf's lies." She glanced across to Uhtred's camp. That it was indeed an honor to be proposed, and gladly he would consider it, should the Witan approve. "Of course he did," Elfrith replied, grimly, "for it has been spoken enough to the right people, behind closed doors. Your proposal to Miral at such a thing only confirmed what many have long approved of." He smiled at Osrith, warmly. "You have just sped up the process, and embedded the idea in his mind. You are more loyal to Mercia than you give yourself credit for." Osrith said no more, and moved even less when she settled down by the ash tree near the fire and closed her eyes, not even stirring when Elfrith came to her, as darkness fell, and covered her in a cloak, sitting by her all night, until the morning came, and they rode south, to Saltwick again. "And what was all that about?" Finan asked, nodding towards Osrith's camp. "Was that bastard captain whimpering for his life?" "That bastard captain was offering his fate, most likely his life, in exchange that his warriors be held entirely blameless for Eardwulf's death," Uhtred mused. "And you are minded to give it to him?" Finan asked, screwing up his eyes. Even when the captain had been opposite Uhtred, his excellent eyesight had failed to pick out who he might be. "I am," Uhtred replied, and then told Finan that many Mersons would have him made Lord of Mercia. Christ, Finan replied, when Uhtred had finished, his eye catching Eadith's again. It would seem that fake, dead Danes coming out of the soil and proclaiming prophecies are not entirely wrong. 88,888,888. Uhtred took the lead as they rode back south to Saltwick. A little way behind rode Osrith and Elfrith, her 3 men behind leading both Heard's and Eadgilf's horses, and in front of them. It was all too slow for her. Osrith's heart wanted to gallop across country with her men and get to Aylesbury, to speak to Miral and Aldhelm. But at the pace needed for the children to stay in the saddle, it was tedious. Behind her, Eglfrith and Oshia were playing scenery, a predictably easy game whereby, whenever there was a bend in the road or there was an undulation in the path, they would guess a feature in the landscape. There had been a minor argument over whether the Severn River, seen more than once, counted as 1 or 2, and that had amused Osrith, but her mind was taken up with getting her men back to Aylesbury as quickly as possible, and that could only be done in the presence of Uhtred. And, presumably, Ethelfled, when they returned to Saltwick. She would join them, she would direct them. And if Uhtred told her of Osrith and what she had done, Ethelfled would, no doubt, find a way to have her trialed for murder. This was on her mind, Osrith thought, but there was more on her heart. Uhtred would have told Finan that she was there, leading the Mercen warriors. But he had sent no word, not even to find out how she was keeping. He had not even turned to look at her. Osrith's only conclusion was that he must be besotted with Eadith then, though his black hair stood out against the green and gold scenery typical of Mercia, and he rode with Ethelstan in front, where Uhtred could keep a good view, not having turned to her, either. Stiora, who seemed a very capable horsewoman, rode with Elfwin, with Eadith beside them. The girl seemed pale and wan, maybe a fever of some sort, which only time in her own home could help. Beside Eadith, Osferth rode, sitting near the back. He had turned to look at Osrith, and smiled once or twice. Maybe grinning, for she must still be covered in blood from killing Eadgilf. But the miles whittled away, and soon the river widened to the settlement where, only 2 nights before, Eadgilf had made them storm, and she hoped that none of them realized that it was them who had broken in, or else things might get much more serious. "Look," Elfrith said sharply, as the gates opened, and Uhtred's party went in. He pointed just beyond, and beside the woman standing there, Ethelfled, of course, stood. Aldhelm. The name burst from her lips, loudly and intensely, and she slipped from her saddle, and trod towards him. Ethelfled gave Osrith a foul look, which she ignored. "I must speak with you," Osrith said. Aldhelm, who had been talking to Ethelfled, looked across at her, falling silent. "I will wait," Osrith said, raising a hand as Aldhelm beckoned them all into the courtyard. "Of course, the Mercen warriors can follow you," she added, "for they are your guard." "How generous of you," Ethelfled murmured to her, sarcasm dripping from every word. "As auxiliary, now the succession is secured, you will no longer be needing me." And she laughed when she saw poor Aldhelm's face. "If you will excuse me, my lady," Aldhelm said, to Ethelfled's obvious disgust, "I will speak to my captain." "Osrith," he said, patient as ever, but with the dark circles and pale face of a man who had not had the luxury of sleep. "Succession?" he asked. "And where is Heard, and the Lord Eadgilf? You left with him, did you not?" But Osrith was not finished yet, and she brought her hand to Morningstar's bridle. "I ask for nothing more than food for her, and a little water for myself," Osrith said. "Whatever the lady can spare." "Osrith, you can come into the fortress. You may eat, you may bathe," he added, when he saw what she looked like. "The men have been accused of killing the Lord Ethliad," Osrith proposed. "They did not, I did not. I took them with Eadgilf as Miral instructed, to find the Lady Elfwin and bring her back securely. She looked at the gates of Saltwick, and she is safe and secure, not gallivanting around the Mercen countryside getting sick. Which is what Uhtred had done, possibly at Ethelfled's behest." "Osrith, Osrith," Aldhelm said, trying to calm her down, and she was aware she was beginning to sound hysterical. "Stop, and try telling me what happened. Eardwulf happened, Osrith told him. We managed to locate Elfwin, and I assumed he was going to order us to fight, to seize her and take her to safety to Aylesbury. But it was a ploy. He had set up the plan to wed her himself and usurp the throne of Mercia. I know, Aldhelm said. I found out after you have left. As I found out he tried to set the murder of Ethliad onto your men. Osrith found herself nodding in agreement. So, Hayad. Murdered, Osrith said, baldly. By Eardwulf. And Eardwulf? Murdered. By me. And Osrith told Aldhelm how he had casually dispatched his captain when he had uncovered the truth of the stolen ring, and Ethliad's murder. I trained Hayad, when he was with the Lord Odder, Osrith added. He did not deserve to die that way. And I was angry, and I flew at him. Aldhelm considered her for a few moments as Osrith said no more. Who witnessed this? Aldhelm asked. All with the Lord Utard, Osrith told him, and all of my men. It cannot be concealed. It will be, Aldhelm told her. It will be arranged. He touched her elbow as if to escort her towards Saltwick, but Osrith shook her arm away from Aldhelm furiously. I will throw myself on my sword, first, rather than enter that woman's hall. Osrith declared, bitterly. Some things can never be forgotten, nor forgiven. And I will not wait out here like a vagabond. Aldhelm did not press her on what she had said, and instead gave a little laugh. It is with regret that I give up my position as auxiliary captain. Once I have returned to Aylesbury for my possessions, I will be leaving the country. Osrith heaved herself up onto Morningstar's back. Aldhelm did not stop her from bringing her horse around in a circle, yet Osrith felt she could not leave yet. Something was wrong, something was missing. Please tell Elfrith he is an excellent commander. In fact, give him captaincy. He negotiated with the Lord Utard magnificently. Just assure me, Aldhelm, that no blame is attached to the reputations of Eglfrith and Ossier and Elfkin. I assure you, Osrith, Aldhelm reiterated, but then held on to Morningstar's bridle. Will you wait? If you have decided to leave, I will not stop you. But, will you delay, just for a few hours? And can you tell me, who has the mercenary ring? That, she could answer, but it was difficult for Osrith to promise the former. Edith, she replied, for she stood in front of her brother and told him that she had seen him crush the Lord Ethliad's skull. Hayad threw it to her, and she kept it. Aldhelm nodded. 2 hours, he told Osrith, until the sun is at its zenith. Then you may do as you will. Do we have an agreement? We do, Osrith confirmed, and began to stare at the wheat field, stare at the brilliant, October sky. And realized that, sometime around now, it was her birthday. She slipped from the saddle and tethered Morningstar, before searching the panniers which hung either side of her mare for any food that remained. Aldhelm watched her, owlishly. Food was brought to Saltwick from Aylesbury, he told her. So I will bring you some of that. I will send Elfrith with refreshment for your horse, she may eat the grass here as she will. Osrith waited, watching the sun in the sky slowly edge its way higher. 88,888,888. And now she was on the run. Behind her, 4 horses were racing after her as she made Morningstar sweat and pant as they rode southeast. The sun had reached the top, and Osrith had, without even a backwards glance, set off from Saltwick. No one came. Not one. Not Aldhelm or Elfrith. Whatever was happening inside Ethelflaed's fortress was of no importance to her, and Osrith fixed her mind on Aylesbury, and then Alba. As she was considering her best passage to Alba, as the sun lit on the main Bicester road, Osrith caused to slow, and then stop, taking a relief in the bushes before remounting. It was pleasant out there, in the fragile autumn sun, as a chill breeze flitted around her, and she wondered what her mother, Jaitha, would have thought when she had given birth to the girl Edra, as she had been, and how her father would have taken the news. Now, she would be returning north to birth her own child, and she was much older than her mother had been. And she was going further north than Bibbenberg, but with some money, and much intelligence. It was just as Osrith got her hands to Morning Star's saddle when she noticed the riders. A black cloud moving across the landscape and, at first, Osrith was minded to look up, for cumulonimbus clouds. But the sky was clear, and Osrith looked again. At that speed, they could only be one thing, riders coming the way she had done. She was being followed by someone who wanted her caught. Over a hedge, and then through a forest, Osrith darted past trees and woodland, with the hope of scattering them. But out on the other side, she realized that it had done nothing to slow their speed, and Morning Star was beginning to tire. Hands on the reins now, Osrith bent her head low to make her horse go faster, but Morning Star was racing as fast as Osrith had remembered, moisture flicking from their coat. Later, Osrith wondered whether she would have been a better rider had she been trained, like her niece, Stiora, or Ethelfled. Perhaps not, but Morning Star was slowing. Those who pursued her were not. She would have to fight. Hunger gnawed at her stomach as her horse slowed her pace, and Osrith looked over her shoulder once again. They were gaining, and she could not stop their acceleration. So, she did not. Turning to face her pursuers, Osrith withdrew Buaid. Morning Star was heaving now at the strain, so Osrith stopped and held her sword out before her. Then, lowered it. For, into her middle vision came someone she knew, having ridden alongside him so many times. Her captain. Miral. Exhausted, Osrith slipped from Morning Star and stood beside her, buoy in hand. Miral slowed and, behind him, her men, Elfrith and Oshir, Egelfrith and Elfkin. Osrith. Miral called, as Osrith held her sword high. She was cold and tired, hungry. But she was prepared to fight to the very end. Osrith. Miral called again, and slipped from his saddle, taking the reins of his black horse in his hand and walking towards her. Have no fear. Do you think we would let you ride alone? And so, again, Osrith's men had shown their loyalty. As ever, my strength is from you all, she said, as the warriors drew slower. It was hardly a speech. Osrith's words seemed to be as tangled as her hair. She got back onto her horse and, Miral and Elfrith on either side of her, rode past Bicester and to High Cross, passing south through Seixas and on, into the plan into which Aylesbury sat. Mercia was getting a new leader and, Osrith knew, she would not be there to see it. Alba was her destination now. She had some silver but, more importantly, now it was clear that Finan had moved on, she had her child to raise. And, too, an offer to make to Constantine. 88,888,888. The Lord Uthed has already been approached and has accepted to be made Lord of Mercia, Miral told her, when they had stabled the horses. The men had gone to get clean. Elfkin had already located his girl and, as Oshir and Egelfrith made it to the armory to get clean, her youngest warrior walked off, arm around her. You will need to talk to him, Osrith said to Miral, as she glanced to Morning Star, who was already being cleaned and brushed by a stable boy. It is better coming from a man. Tell him to leave girls alone and try boys. Miral replied. He was trying to make her feel better with the weak quip, and Osrith indulged him. Okay, Elfrith then? She played along. Osrith, come with me. I think you need a little more care than you are allowing yourself, he told her. I will be leaving, Miral, Osrith said, but conceded to follow, into the armory, and the room beyond, where she had sat with him on some nights, when she had talked with him. Not Miral, but Aldhelm, was also lost to her, lost to the Lady Ethelfled. She had suggested it. It made head sense, though it made her heart sore to her loss. Wait, Miral said, and left the room for a second, opening the door to the corridor, and Osrith heard the latch click open. The men need their captain, Miral told her, severely. Can you bring yourself to leave them? Elfrith can lead them, he is more than competent. I committed murder before their eyes. Justice, and leadership, that is how I heard it. From each and every one of your men. They say the same. Osrith, he furthered, putting a hand on her shoulder, but Osrith turned and spoke first. I need to go, out in duty, as far from here as I can. The men need to remain here, but this time Miral interrupted Osrith. What do I need to say to you to make you understand that Eärgylf did not succeed in smearing their reputation? Then I killed a man for nothing. She looked away, but Miral rested a hand on her shoulder again. You killed a man for failing to recognize his duty, perhaps, just perhaps, having this child has distorted your judgment? You did not see the look on Eadith's face, she replied. Yet, she had. Eadith had cried, for the shock, but she was not grieved by it. She had readily accepted the Merson ring. An unfortunate decision. He was the murderer of the leader of a country, king in all but name. The king of Wessex is still here, and that rat-faced advisor of his, Miral added, making themselves at home. You merely accelerated the process of selecting a lord. In fact, may I be so bold as to say, you might have saved Mercia from the voracity of Wessex. A new lord now, rather than one decided by a wit and fraught with inertia, will cauterize Edward's ambition. Rest, he added, seeing the exhaustion on Osrith's face. You are safe here. As you wanted to be, and took her hand. I can send a healer to you. No. Osrith protested a little too quickly, and then smiled with effort to her friend. A rest perhaps, she conceded, and blinked several times when Miral answered a knock to the outer armory door and 2 servants brought in a copper of water. Even you must admit you need to bathe, Miral told her. I have left suitable clothing on the table there, he nodded to the corner. I will wait beyond. No one will disturb you. The water enveloped Osrith's sore muscles and tired head, as she gratefully slipped her naked body into the water. Someone had had the foresight to bring ferns, and she cleaned herself all over with the leaves, which dingled her skin and dissolved the dirt. How long she bathed, Osrith did not know, but she got out when the water was beginning to feel cold, and dressed in the clothes Miral had left for her, leaving her other ones in their place. They were tight, even though it was clear Miral had carefully chosen a shirt which was loose-fitting, made for a man with longer arms than Osrith had. She could alter it, Osrith thought, or find a seamstress to make a better job of it than she ever could. Her eyelids were beginning to droop. She needed to sleep, now, she thought as she pushed open the door to the guard room. As promised, Miral was waiting for her, feet crossed at the ankles as he read a parchment by the light of a small window which permitted the day's bright sunlight to illuminate it. Have you considered? Miral said, as he got to his feet. Considered whether I will stay in Mercia? Osrith said. She was too tired to think. I have not. But there is regime change. The new lord, the Lord Utard, will not wish me to be in his country. I could never trust him, after, she broke off, noting Miral's expression. Aelfrith told you? He did. And may I assure you it did not come from his usual gossip. He told me for the love he feels for you, for eternal love between warriors. Osrith found herself nodding. She understood. What is it that you propose, were I to remain in Mercia? She asked. What would you like? Now that was a question. She would like a Mercia that did not have her brother as its lord, subject to his whims and decisions. She would like a Mercia with the Lord Aethliad still, and she realized now how much she respected the man. Weakened and subject to his own whims not always apparent to all, he was no worse than other kings, and his reputation had been maligned in Wessex. She knew what that felt like. A permanent border guard. Allowance to raise my child as I see fit, not to have him or her taken from me. These were weak conditions, for all that really was in Osrith's mind was to demand Aethliad rise from the grave and continue to rule. It could never work here. Like the vixen whose cubs she had disturbed one morning, throwing herself, teeth and claws at Osrith during her journey from east to west of Northumbria, she felt like that. Knowing what she did of her brother, when he realized one of his guards was his sister, his pregnant sister, what was stopping him from harming her, or her child? If it had been her alone. But she could not countenance ridding herself of Finan's child. Even lost to her now, as he was, Osrith knew what they had when they were together. She knew their bond. The child would be born, and would speak Gaelish and would live in Alba. One day, She would put him before his father, make him see his child, see what they had made. Sleep, Miral encouraged, as Osrith yawned, and then yawn more. Go back to your house. It has been cleaned in your absence and rest. Speak to me in the morning,